Less Common Metals now for some period of time as we commercialise Ionic Technologies and produce high purity separated magnet rare earths to go into the products that Less Common Metals will make. And through the collaboration agreement that we've announced with Ford, we'll be producing the products that will ultimately end up in the electric motors that will be developed at the Harwood facility in the UK. So that relationship that we've been working on there with Less Common Metals is progressing very, very well. And we're now at the point where we're now looking at how we can work towards commercialising, not just in the UK, but in other jurisdictions. So it's a very positive MOU, and it will be, I think, an unlock for the technology and the company as we move forward, commercialising partnerships, and we expect that there will be news flow over this over the course of the next 3 to 6 months.
And Tim, what are the steps for advancing that MOU into some kind of binding agreement?
So clearly the intent is there from both sides. Ourselves and Less Common Metals, we have a very collaborative working relationship. Obviously, the focus at the moment, or up to this point, has been on neodymium iron boron metals and alloys, but we are expanding the nature of the MOU to also look at samarium, cobalt and scandium, which I think are two areas of substantial growth, and also a differentiator for us and our role in the supply chain that's emerging. So with that MOU now in place, we've got several discussions underway at the moment, working towards firstly supporting the business case on the commercialisation of Ionic Technologies in Belfast, the products that come out of that, and how that can flow into a UK supply chain where Less Common Metals is one of the only metal makers, metal and alloy makers in the rare earth space that operates outside of Asia. And so we've got through that relationship, a unique opportunity to move towards now commercial partnerships and the ability to work closely with the supply chain. So the magnet manufacturers and the OEMs. So we will now work through this process over the next 12 months to firstly position the business case for Ionic Technologies in the UK. But as the MOU stated, we are looking at North America, and we do anticipate that there'll be other jurisdictions where we'll be able to work together closely.
And Tim, there have been a number of announcements from European government bodies and United States government bodies to accelerate strategic partnerships and relationships to secure those supply chains. What sort of pressure are companies like Less Common Metals under to really accelerate this sort of supply chain security?
Well, I think collectively, both ourselves and Less Common Metals are very uniquely placed to be able to provide recycled materials into the European and US markets from our Belfast facility. We are working very closely now with magnet manufacturers who have had a lot of inbound requests for that recycled content. We actually had a call with someone this morning that's looking for up to 70% of their magnet supply chain coming from recycled material by the end of this decade. So there is a significant growing appetite for the recycled material. And I think through the relationship that ourselves and Less Common Metals have formed and continue to build upon, and the relationships that will naturally lead to in the magnet rare earth supply chain, I think we're going to be both beneficiaries of this working relationship to build scale and capacity outside of Asia.
And being one of the few Australian listed companies that actually is producing rare earth material at the moment via the Belfast facility, can you give us a bit of a progress report on what's happening over in the UK with Ionic Tech?
Yes, so we continue to produce product. We've got certainly had a tremendous amount of inbound inquiry on the quality of the products. And now on the back of these tariffs that have been implemented both in the US and Europe, we continue to obviously witness the tailwinds that have been driven by that. Huge amount of supply chain engagement, whether it be from the current manufacturing base or new OEMs across the EV and offshore wind or wind turbine sectors that are looking to bring in a portion of their supply chain through recycled materials. So we've had a number of groups coming through, and those groups are now working towards strategic partnerships where we can commercialise the technology and actually, beyond what we're going to do in Belfast, look at the global rollout of the technology. And as we mentioned in the MOU with LCM, obviously a big opportunity we see beyond the opportunity in Europe is North America. And so we are progressing a number of opportunities there, and hopefully over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, be in a position to talk about those partnerships, those commercial opportunities where we will start producing the recycled materials, separated high purity magnet rare earths, and be able to help build those new supply chains.
And Tim, that facility in Europe will be part of the puzzle that could help close the loop, given the enormous amount of material coming from decommissioning wind turbines and then feeding the supply of those rare earth materials back into the manufacturing chain there. There must be quite a fall across the continent there. How many thousands of wind turbines are there?
Well, look, we know on the island of Ireland itself, there's about 3,000 wind turbines. And that is certainly, as you cross into continental Europe, there are substantial wind farms that were early adopters of wind energy. They are approaching the end of life, and so we do know where those wind farms, those operators are. The UK, being one of the early adopters of offshore wind, has a fleet of offshore wind turbines that are approaching the end of life towards the end of this decade. And so that will obviously provide potential feed for what we're going to be building in Northern Ireland. But beyond that, I mean, one of the big advantages of the technology is that we're not dependent on end-of-life materials. We take the materials that are generated in the process, in the production of metals, alloys, and swarf, and that can be anywhere from 15 to 40% of the input material ending up as waste. And our technology provides a mechanism for that material to be put back into the supply chain and limit the amount of waste. The alternative up until this point is for that material to flow into the existing supply chain through Southeast Asia into China. And so with a technology that is now miles ahead of other players in this space, producing the high purity products that the market is looking for, we are seizing upon that opportunity policy, which is making it illegal for that material to leave the jurisdiction of the EU. And given our position in Northern Ireland as part of what is the Windsor framework, we have an ability to participate in both the UK and the European market. So we're perfectly placed to be a beneficiary of these tremendous policies and initiatives to create, firstly, a circular economy for magnet rare earths, but that sustainable, traceable supply chain and those new markets that will emerge.
It's a tectonic shift, that's for sure, and Belfast is ideally placed on that continent. Moving to the other continent, Tim, would you like to update shareholders on the Viridis joint venture co and the significance of that?
Yeah, look, we've been talking with the team at Viridis for some time, and very pleased to be able to commit to the joint venture and work with Arga and Raphael and the team at Viridis to now help them look at unlocking the value of the product that will be produced from the Colossus project. Firstly, through the development of a refinery that will have the capacity to separate both light and heavy rare earths, but also to bring magnet recycling to the Brazilian market. And we've been engaging with the Brazilian government for the best part of 2 years on what we've been doing with Ionic Technologies. There is an appetite to build that capacity and capability in Brazil, and through the joint venture, we can combine both of them into a much more powerful proposition for the Brazilian government and stakeholders. We've hosted visits from the Brazilian government delegation in April, and we can see a huge opportunity in that Brazilian market, given the potential supply, upstream supply that's available, and our ability through Ionic Rare Earths and Ionic Technologies to be a conduit to unlock the value of that mixed rare earth carbonate into products that can go into further value addition, whether that be metals, alloys, and magnets in that Brazilian theatre. So I think it is a tremendous opportunity for the company to be part of a new landscape on rare earth supply and being one of the early movers in setting the framework of what that supply chain could look like.
And with some of the other numbers coming out of the Colossus, it represents a pretty good company to be partnering with for their project as it moves forward too. I'm going to move on now to the chairman, Brett Lynch, who's 3 months with his feet on the desk, and we'd like to hear what your thoughts are and what you found and what you're looking forward to, Brett.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And, nice to actually meet a lot of the shareholders for the first time. After 3 months, I'm happy to report that I am seeing more clearly what I did foresee in joining Ionic 3 months ago. And that really was an organisation that was starting a journey, but was to build a leading supply chain for rare earths, specialising in heavy rare earths, right through to recycling, to secure that supply chain for the Western world. That having come from the lithium industry was an important and necessary supply chain to build. And I had no doubt that in time the right support would come quickly to enable certain companies to succeed in that. Today, I think Ionic is actually positioning itself very well to be a leader in that challenge. It's not a small challenge because of where China sits and dominates, the pressure on the pricing. But I think with fleet-footed, good assets and a great strategy, this actually can be managed. And that's where I think Ionic is well positioned. It's got a unique positioning in having all the way, good assets right from the start of the supply chain in Africa with Makuutu as a very high, heavy rare earth deposit, right through to now, as Tim was talking, Belfast, with unique, patented and world-leading separation technology for recycling. And then the opportunity is to commercialise those two ends of the bookcase and then span and bridge in between. And you can hear what progress, frankly, has just been made in the last 3 months. Belfast is now producing and demonstrating a quality product for sale in the Western world. And that is a very significant step for any company to achieve. And we're now looking to commercialise that. And of course, we're seeing strong support from both customers, end users, as well as governments. And I think that is going to help us spearhead or springboard the company through lower capital cost, higher, faster returns, and being able to control, without needing the impacts from China. We can short circuit the Chinese supply chain through recycling alloys and magnets. And Belfast gives us a very strong position there, way above our weight division at the moment, to actually lead that restructuring of the industry. And no surprise why Tim has been working then to develop these relationships with the likes of LCM and others to be announced on building a consortium to actually take control of that piece of the supply chain.
It's an interesting situation, Brett, from someone with a engineering history like yourself. These days, I think the average mine going from discovery to mine is 10 plus years. Ionic here is actually going into production well in advance of having to go through all those challenging hurdles, and that puts their framework right into the supply chain straight away, with production coming from Belfast and also the pilot plant in Makuutu. What advantages do you see now for a company that can move quickly into a commercial growth part of their strategy without having to go through all the mine building process that other companies would have to?
Look, that's exactly why we've prioritised the commercialisation of our downstream asset in Belfast, and to create, the first fully then recyclable supply chain in the Western world. That, on behalf of shareholders, I think is very attractive. As you say, the permitting issue of building a relatively small scale factory in somewhere like Belfast is infinitesimal compared to most other jurisdictions in the world. The capital costs are an order of magnitude lower. The technology has actually been developed such that it can be reproduced, in those factories and located at many locations around the world. And that's what Tim's looking to expand on. So we can do things in parallel. We can grow the business and the footprint that way. And that allows us to really leverage and monetize our first lever advantage with this unique patented technology. So that was why very quickly into the job, we've really moved, I think, on behalf of shareholders, but also in terms of where our capacity and capability is, where we can make the maximum impact. And, I'm looking for Ionic to be, a world leader in this recycling end of the supply chain.
Well, thank you for the progress report across a number of those significant issues and announcements the company's made in the last few weeks and months. Tim, what have we got to look forward to, and what is your message for shareholders?
Yeah, look, I think as we've covered off here, the news flow of late and Brett's comments just now, monetizing Ionic Technologies is the number one focus, right? So we're progressing those discussions that we've been working on over a period of time now towards commercial partnerships. And we're looking forward to being in a position to announce those to the market over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, because we are in front and we've got a huge opportunity to be part of a new landscape that does provide an alternative source and supply of magnet rare earths into these new markets that are emerging in the US and Europe. And I think with the government support that has been demonstrated, certainly by the grants we've received in the UK, but now we're seeing with tariffs implemented in North America and or the US and Europe, I think we're perfectly positioned to be a net beneficiary of a desire to decouple from the existing supply chain.
Okay, so some exciting times coming up, and we encourage shareholders to keep in touch with the company via their LinkedIn profile or by subscribing to their news flow at their website. Gentlemen, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you to our audience, and we'll be sending this recording out on the mailing list later today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.